Howdy, howdy, folks. Welcome to my second ever debate, debating with a random community member. And today's topic is on theism. So, I think I will leave it to my guest to start us off. What is your opening question?
What exactly? What is your comp?
What do I believe? Okay. In regards to theism, I find myself unconvinced of any claims of divinity. And I think that anyone who claims anything in anything that's supernatural, be that a particularly religious, or that be ghosts, or that be anything that falls under the very wide umbrella of supernatural things. I think they must first and foremost face down the war cry of science. Prove it. You know, they must be able to submit their observations to a peer-reviewed paper. That paper must then be peer-reviewed and be studied. And I've been thinking about it. Even if tomorrow a scientific paper came out saying we have found proof of a god, that a god exists, and even if we were to totally assume a god exists, we can point a telescope up into the sky and they're just hanging out next to Jupiter, waving at us. We would then have to ascertain, well, whose God is it? Is it a God we are familiar with any of the thousands that are on Earth, or is it something totally new and unconnected? I think that every religion, particularly Christianity, they have like 1,000 assumptions stacked on top of each other, and all that I ask is that they manage to prove each and every one of those for me to believe each and every one of those. I need to be presented with um, falsifiable evidence and a good argumentation. There's actually, I wrote on this a long time ago. There's two paragraphs that I'll read you that really encapsulate my thought process on religion. It's the argument of locality. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's 7 pages long, but the opening paragraph is really good. The argument from locality runs as follows. Every religion currently being practiced on this planet, as well as every past religion which no longer has followers, has a definite and discernible origin in time and space. Even if the exact beginnings of that religion are murky, that religion still originated in a definite area and a definite time period. However, I argue that any god or gods that existed which desired to reveal themselves to humanity would not do this. They would not provide a revelation to only one culture at one time in one place. There are several good reasons to believe this, and if it holds, then any religion which did have only a single point of origin cannot possibly be true. In fact, that all sorry, the fact that all religions originated in one specific culture at one specific time and place strongly points to their being a product of that culture, time, and place, and not a product of divine revelation. Floor is yours.
I mean, you said a lot in a short amount of time, but
Sorry.
yeah, those are good. Well, I think the first thing that really caught my so science, science, science is you believe that it's a compelling way to prove the existence of God. And I think this is a little bit misguided. What is science to you?
Science is the scientific method. It is the way at which it is the most reliable method that we have of observing the universe. We make an observation.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah, why is that?
We have yet to come across a better way of ascertaining information.
How
There's
does one know this?
there's no the scientific method. We observe something, then we
Well, no, no. I'm aware of what the scientific method is. Do you know what the demarcation problem is?
run that by me.
How do you discern between science and pseudoscience if there is a separation between the two? I think that the term science is well, I think the term science is a little bit misguided. Science doesn't imply the scientific method. Science in a original sense just means knowledge, and when translated, we've separated the science and knowledge. Science now means process of coming about knowledge, and knowledge is just knowledge. So the issue with science is science doesn't know a specific method or dogma. It's more of just a way of coming about knowledge. So when we say things like science is necessary, or my science necessary proves something, right? It is like synonymous with saying that my method is necessary of proving something, and this that other methods are kind of tossed aside,
Mm,
and we well, no, I mean this is facts. I mean, for example, we went from an, we went to a heliocentric model, right? This is a good example. This is an example that a lot of philosophers that revolved around science is we went around to a heliocentric model after Galileo, right? Beforehand, we actually had models that the Earth was the center of the universe, right? Everything revolved around us. We moved to a model in which the sun was the kind of the thing that we revolved around. And
yes.
the issue with this is that actually the heliocentric model for a very long time wasn't capable of warranting or proving a lot of the issues with it. So one of the most common issues with the heliocentric model was the fact that uh, it was somewhat odd that the planets didn't gain size or shape um, uh, base. So, for example, the planet Venus would stay the exact size year round, um, but heliocentric modeling at the time would suggest that, well, logically, Venus at some point would be farther away than it would be the Earth. So that means there would be a change, a noticeable size or change in the size of Venus. But this obviously wasn't
Yes,
true,
but we can
and you've
account for
got
this using the scientific method. The scientific method, one of the
no.
beautiful things about it is that
No,
it self-updates, it
no.
self-corrects, you know?
No, this is not the point of the discussion. The point is that models, what we define as science, is nothing more than models or methods for coming to knowledge, for coming to know something. And it's kind of an epistemic issue um, to say that one model is better than another. Like there are models that come to conclusions better than others.
Yes, and the best model we have
No.
to coming to
How
reliable
so?
conclusions is the
Why?
scientific method.
No.
Not only
How so?
that, but it can be used so reliably as to
No.
when we come across new information, we can retroactively correct the old information, you
This
know?
is no. This is
First there was Newton, then came along Einstein, then Hawking, each one
New,
explaining the holes in the theories of the last.
Newton disagreed with your method. You have a
Newton lived hundreds of years ago. I don't give a shit.
well, I mean,
Science self updates
you
all the time. It's
no,
the current
you're
consensus.
not you're not following. You're like one of these Neil deGrasse Tyson like science enjoyers like the
I do quite enjoy science. Isn't that weird?
well, I mean, the issue is that you have like a Popperian view of science, like this, like, that claims must be falsifiable, and that is like the separation between science and pseudoscience, right? Is that
Well, an
all?
unfalsifiable claim I would very comfortably call pseudoscience, yes. If
No,
your
this is
claim cannot be proven false or detected in any method, then it functionally doesn't exist to us.
but that's yeah, no, that's not valuable. Like
It,
your
it is
method
valuable.
no, it's not
All of
valuable
our
because
observations are done within the observable
no,
universe.
but there's plenty of things that you're not able to falsify that are factual statements. So when you have things that are like, well, I wouldn't want to. I'm not going to define them as a priori, but like when you have statements like the Earth exists, is a
Yes.
non-falsifiable statement,
No, that is a
right?
falsifiable statement.
No, it's not a falsifiable
We can
statement.
test if the Earth exists. I can throw a rock at the ground.
You cannot falsify this. This is the Popperian view of science. Like we've come to this
We can
conclusion.
prove the Earth exists through the
No,
scientific
it's
method. We
you
can
have to
observe.
falsify this belief. That is the Popperian method. That is a logical positivist claim.
If the Earth didn't actually exist, we could tell that via the scientific method.
No,
We
no,
can tell
no,
it's
no.
round. We can tell
You're
it's an
missing.
oblate
You're
spheroid.
missing the point. It's the exact opposite of what you're saying. It has to be falsifiable. So when you have things like okay, let's give an example. Another one is like one that's unfalsifiable. These actually are very similar claims, and this kind of proves why the Popper method of falsifying claims is a bad standard or method for science. Um, when you have things like there's a teapot in space somewhere, right? That's a non-falsifiable claim. This is synonymous with the claim that Earth exists. Like, like you are not capable of falsifying the claim, right? Like, there's no capable way. No one's capable of doing this. But this is obviously a claim of some sort. This is a like we are denoting a claim. Like, I am saying something exists, something that is so evident, but can you falsify it? Well, you can't falsify it. Well, by most positivist methods today, it requires that you falsify things.
Okay.
This is this
Let me
what we're
simplify
talking
then the scientific method for you. Can you prove it?
What does it mean to prove
That
something?
is the spear that
This
bloodies
that is
every
not
god that's ever
that is
existed.
absolutely not what science. You are not okay. That is not the model that we use for science. It is not whether or not you can prove things to be true, but whether or not you can falsify them. Right? So
You cannot prove God exists. Therefore,
no,
functionally,
we're not
God doesn't
talking about.
exist.
No, that's not okay. That's a terrible claim. But no one's making a theistic claim. This is like
The topic of the discussion is theism.
we are talking. I understand this. We are talking about the demarcation problem. The issue is that the current standard for science is based off of Popper, and the Popper kind of stance on science is that claims have to be falsifiable. The issue is that there's claims that aren't falsifiable, right? There are an abundance of claims that aren't falsifiable that are continually possible though, right? It is possible that the Earth exists. It's, however, very impossible to falsify this. So when we come to these types of conclusions, what exactly is science? Like how can we have claims that are so evident but they're not capable of being proven through current methods, right? So the idea is that, well, your method of science, or what science is just a method of coming about knowledge, is no different than other methods, except for the semantics of it. So like how you come to the conclusion, perhaps. And here's
Falsifiable means able to be proven false. We can prove that the earth exists, therefore it is falsifiable.
No, that's like the opposite of falsifiable. If you can prove it, then it isn't falsifiable.
I think you misunderstand how these terms are being used.
No, I'm very much aware.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot
When you're
prove
trying to
things.
prove something falsifiable, you're trying to prove if it actually exists. If you
No,
can't,
you're trying to prove that it's
if
wrong.
if the hypothesis is
Just
that Earth exists, then you
false.
can try as hard as you can to
Okay.
prove that the Earth doesn't
I'll
exist.
I'll switch notes because you don't know what positivism is, so we'll just switch notes to epistemology. What is the basis of science?
Observation, hypothesis, testing
What
those
type of
hypotheses.
okay, it's okay. What is the basis for observation?
What do you mean?
What is the basis of observation?
We use tools and instruments, including our
To do what?
eyes and senses, to observe phenomena in the world around us.
So empiricism.
Yes.
Okay, warrant empiricism.
What do you mean?
How can you how
Hang on.
in what
Hang on. I'm going to dig into this because you did this in the last debate. It seems like you're more concerned with digging into the semantic arguments of.
None of this is semantic. You are making claims that science is a necessary tool to prove something.
It is our most reliable tool for proving everything.
You say this, but I don't believe this to be true. I think
Why?
You don't understand.
Hang on. Let me ask you a question. Are you religious?
Yes.
Why?
Okay, you're pivoting.
I'm examining your beliefs.
Well, yes, and we're talking about science. I disagree with how you believe we should prove things.
Okay.
And
But let me demonstrate
you
something for
you
you.
can be an atheist with this. Like this is not a religious argument. Like your standard for science, I believe, is not valid in some sense or way. I don't believe the demarcation problem exists. I think the demarcation problem is a ruse that basically solidifies the idea that there is an objective science and that there are things that can be denoted as pseudos. I
Okay.
don't believe this to be true. I think it's false. I think this is false because all models are capable of reaching conclusion. Now, the reason I think that the demarcation problem is specifically false is because I don't think that there's a separation between science and pseudoscience, only methods in which we reach conclusion. Now,
Okay,
you can
but
say
that's your
that the,
problem right there.
why is it
The
false?
fact that you don't think that there's a separation between science and pseudoscience
There isn't.
means that you don't understand science.
No,
Science is what do you
this
use
is a
to.
circular. What is science?
Science is the scientific method. It is how we
No,
prove
pause,
things
pause. No,
exist.
no, that is not what science is.
Yes,
That
it
is your
is.
method of science. No, it is not.
The scientific method is what
Okay,
people refer to when they're
a
talking
thousand years
about
ago,
science.
if no, this is just no, no, no. This is absurd. 1,000 years ago, if you were to ask someone what science is, their answer is completely different, but they have an answer for you.
Because science
Sci-
self updates.
No, no, no. Science doesn't self up. No, no. This. Well, yes and no. Self updates. Updates is a weird term. Science, the method in which we choose to define a science changes, but that doesn't mean it necessarily updates. The models change completely. So when we go from an egocentric model, or where the Earth is like the thing that everything revolves around, to like a heliocentric model, that isn't science being updated. That is models changing. Like, so when we have models for science like this, like what the standard is between science, I mean, for example, we went between herbalistic practices. In fact, Isaac Newton was very much an alchemist and an urban, I can't say the word, but practiced using herbs. This was the science, burning, kind of what we would think of witchcraft, but not really. But alchemy is no longer considered. I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Let me give you 1 second here.
Okay. While he's doing that, I'm going to point out this is the scientific method: observation or question the world around you, research the topic on that area, hypothesis. Test with an experiment, test your hypothesis, analyze the data, report conclusions. And then it goes out to be peer reviewed. That is what we are talking about when we are
No.
talking about the
Did
scientific
you just say
method.
peer review?
Oh, sorry, I was explaining to the audience what the scientific
Oh,
method was, in case anyone didn't know.
did you just say peer review?
Peer review is an important part of the scientific method.
Peer review is fake. But anyways, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Here is the scientific method for you. Here is what we are referring to when I
I'm
refer
aware of
to.
what the scientific method is. So you have to understand that our methods of what we define as science. Well, okay, science is nothing more than the process in which we come about knowledge. You believe that science is synonymous with the word scientific method? No. The
Yes.
science. No, this is not synonymous. This is not synonymous.
Every scientist walking the planet uses the scientific method
Okay,
to
this is a
conduct their
relative.
research.
This is awesome. This is a
Research.
relative. This okay. My whole argument is that this is a relative claim. You go back 1,000 years ago, science, the method at which we come about conclusion, would be something like alchemy. Well, actually, 1,000 years ago, it probably.
And then through the scientific method, we found alchemy to
No,
be
it is.
outdated. Through the scientific
The
method, we
alchemists
found
produced
the
theory. No, that's
Earth-centric
not.
view of the universe to be
No,
outdated, and we switched to the
that's not.
heliocentric view.
That's actually not what we did. That's completely.
That's
false.
exactly what we did. That's been the history of science for the past 2,000 years.
You say history, but you know nothing of it. You are saying that the heliocentric model came about through the scientific method. That is absolutely absurd.
Galileo was famous for hiding from the church because they kept getting on his ass. Religious people didn't want to accept reality because it made them feel less special.
You know nothing of history. Then Galileo would depict his scientific writings in a kind of in a dialectic manner, not dialectic, in a dialogue writing. So, for example, if you've ever read Plato's Republic, for example, that is a dialogue writing. So you have fictional characters in which one of them is supposedly Galileo.
Are you trying to argue that Galileo wrote the fiction of the heliocentric model?
No, you're not. You're not listening at all. I'm saying that your claim that he was a martyr for science is false. So this is a.
He was absolutely a martyr for science.
He instigated the church by depicting the church in a dialogue writing as ignorant.
They were
That was-
ignorant.
Okay, that is an instigative thing. Like, I'm not going to argue with you. Like, if me and you are like two separate parties, and I write a book and I basically allude to that the stupid person in the book is you specifically, whether or not it's true that you're stupid or not, is an instigation. Galileo wasn't some martyr who just like looked in a telescope and church kicked down his door and like fucking like was like,
He
I don't
looked
like
in a
you. No,
telescope and he wrote that the Earth was no longer the
Was
center of the
no
universe. The
Galileo
church
was
got
no
angry
it is
and
no it is
stepped in.
no you know nothing, you know nothing of science and you know
Hmm.
nothing of history. No, you don't. You can't
And
even
yet,
name
here
one.
you are deluded with the idea that the
No,
scientific method is not
oh, a
synonymous with what we're
scientific
talking
method.
about.
Okay, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't listen. I don't care, bro. Like the fact of the matter is that all your science is based off empiricism and a posteriori freaking knowledge, and none of it's real.
Empiricism,
And this fact,
yes. The method by
empiricism.
which we arrive at information empirically exists.
Oh
I'm
my
not
god.
I'm not praying to some higher being
No
that we
one.
can't prove
This
exists.
isn't a theistic claim. This isn't. This has
I
nothing to
think
do
your
with religion.
theism is corrupting your reason. I
No
think
one.
that's the problem here.
Oh my god, that is really rich. No, no
Hmm.
one, no one is based. This is none of these are theistic claims. These are all like actual things. Like they're like most atheists. Well, let's say put it like this: most people who read books are not very much logical positivists. The ideas of Kuhn and Popper are generally tossed aside as being ignorant. The demarcation problem is generally considered to be non-existent. The idea that there's a separation between pseudoscience, what we define as science, doesn't actually exist. And none of the models you're referring to are the result of the scientific method. The heliocentric model is riddled with issues in which Galileo basically just said, you know what, I'm not going to care. We're just going to write this down. This is
And
quite
you
a
know
common
what?
critique. I
And
mean,
you know what?
I mean, it's just like,
Charles Darwin was wrong about most of his writings too, but we still have the theory of evolution because science self corrects.
yeah, okay,
Even if a
evolution.
scientist like Charles Darwin gets
I
something
don't believe
wrong.
in evolution, but that's fine.
Oh, you don't believe in one of the most well proven, well founded
Why
areas
is
of
it?
study in the
How is
scientific.
in what sense is it proven?
We have evidence both from archaeology, from the fossils of animals, as well as current experiments. Have you ever heard of the black fly experiment?
No, but go ahead and inform me.
Okay, so essentially, they took a whole bunch of flies for about 60 years, which is, I think, what was it, like 130,000 generations of flies? And they stuck them in complete darkness. And they watched those flies evolve in real time. You can do this on a much faster scale with like
You're
viruses or
talking about
bacteria.
micro. There's instances of microevolution.
There
This
is no
is
difference between micro and macro evolution. I am
that's
well
true.
familiar with this. I grew up in
Uh,
the church.
I
This is
don't
one of the
believe
first
that
areas of
evolution.
study that I
Yes,
studied.
that's awesome. There is microevolution. Yes, the patterns of behavior can change over generations. This is somewhat true. But the idea that I personally don't believe in actual evolution. I do not believe that we are
Can you
one
prove that? Can you write a
we
research paper proving that there is no difference between micro and macro evolution, submit that to peer review, and then
yeah,
disprove the
yeah.
entire field of
So
evolution?
dude, my critique is on the idea of science itself. Peer review doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
see, that's kind of the hitting the nail on the head.
No,
You have
it's
these
not.
beliefs of a god. You have these beliefs that
It has
the
nothing to do with
scientific
God. It has
method is
nothing.
not synonymous with
It has
science,
nothing to do.
and that there's
Stop.
no difference
Wait,
between
wait. Stop.
pseudoscience and
Wait,
real
wait,
science.
wait.
Hang on, let me
Let's
finish. Let me finish.
this is religious
You have
logic.
these
No one is doing this.
you have these religious ideas where you know that you cannot defend an actual existence of a god because I
Wait a
would
second.
nail your
Wait,
ass
that
to
is
the
not. Wait, that is
wall.
not true. No one. You have not asked me to do so.
Hang
I
on,
am
I'm
simply.
not
Yeah,
done yet.
your beliefs are.
And
And you said this.
instead, you're trying to harp on what you think is the more
Now
defensible
you're
position of
purposely
attacking
avoiding.
the entire
I'll.
idea of empiricism.
Okay, so I'm gonna respond now. Is that good?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, yeah, everything you just said was false. None of those are my beliefs. Let's put it very clearly. You say that there's a standard which we prove. I disagree with this thing. That is not synonymous with saying that I cannot prove something to be true. I believe that your standard for proving this is wrong, though. I think that your standard is arrogant in a sense. The idea of
Arrogant.
science, well, of course,
Science self updates when it's wrong. Has the church
it
self
doesn't. The
updated
science,
when it was
no
wrong?
models, no models. Okay, stop using the word update. Let's use better terms. The model that we use to come to conclusions changes over time, right? However, what distinguishes science from pseudoscience is an issue. So
Is
models
whether or
that we
not it's factual. and we determine whether or
How
not
do
it's
you?
factual
No, that's
via the
not true, man.
scientific
That's
method.
not true. That's not true.
Observation, research,
That's not true.
hypothesis,
They
test,
did not have the
analyze,
scientific
report.
they did not have the scientific method when they went to the heliocentric model. And you accept this as a true and factual statement. Galileo did not peer review the heliocentric model, nor did he test it in any way. In what way could Galileo test the heliocentric model? Now, there's observability.
Take a class in astronomy, son. That's
No, that's not a. Wait, this is like the common issue between evolution.
you can learn.
And
Okay,
mathematics.
Einstein can do this. You can measure the gravity of
Einstein
light,
thinks like
or
800 years
how
ago.
light is affected by
You
gravity.
are claiming that the scientific method is what resulted in the heliocentric model. This is not
No,
true.
I'm claiming that the scientific method is our single most reliable tool for obtaining information.
Except that the scientific method wasn't used at all to come to the conclusions that we have today around the heliocentric model. None of them.
You realize more research into astronomy has been done since the
That
16th
has
century,
nothing
right?
to do with my claim.
It has everything to do with your point.
Respond to my claim.
I have talked multiple times about how science is self-updating, but you, like many Christians, are harping on someone who's been dead for centuries.
You are saying nothing more for your viewers that I am just like this. This is the dog whistle. All you're doing is saying this guy is religious, so that anyone listening right now denotes what I'm saying is a religious argument.
Let me put it this way:
if any atheist could come to this.
This is the equivalent. This is the equivalent of you pointing out that Charles Darwin was scientifically wrong about some of his claims, and then going, see, the scientific method didn't succeed. It's been hundreds of years. We have tested and proven these 1,000 times over.
If you think that all I'm doing is pointing out the insufficiencies of other people to basically say that
from centuries ago.
Yeah, that is not the claim. Yeah, I know. You're just building on what I'm saying. I'm not saying from centuries ago. Yes, no one is making this claim. This is why you're wrong. I am simply saying that I do not believe that there is a separation between science and pseudos. I believe that this is a ruse that was created by the scientific community.
Oh, it's a conspiracy now.
Of course, yes. By definition.
Thousands and thousands of scientists for centuries have been just scheming together to trick the world into thinking that the Earth revolves around the sun. Brilliant. Do you have a shred of evidence for that?
Yeah, wait. You see, this is the issue. That was a complete straw man. No one is okay. Let's put it like this. I think it's a ruse that there's a demarcation problem. I do not believe there's a separation between science and pseudoscience. All you did just now was go, oh, so you think scientists are lying to us? No.
That is what you said.
No, I think that scientists are under the impression that there's a separation between their method as being, let's say, valid and other methods.
Because we can prove it.
No, you cannot prove this.
Yes, we use the scientific method to prove it.
That is a circular argument. You cannot use the scientific method to disprove. The demarcation problem can't be disproven or proven with the scientific method.
I don't know how familiar you are with the scientific method. Let me run it by you real quick.
Okay, how about this? Go ahead and use the scientific method to answer the demarcation problem, because you would be the first philosopher in the last, 600 years that this problem has been alluded to. Go ahead.
Actually, philosophy and science intertwine in many interesting ways.
That's
For
awesome.
instance, the old question, if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? Science proved that by saying sound is vibrations through the air. We can observe that by observing the vibrations through the air. We can measure them through the decibel system. Science and pseudoscience are two vastly different things, and we can tell that because we can employ the scientific method onto all of pseudoscience and shred it to pieces.
Name a philosopher of science.
Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan.
Yeah, one of the greatest scientific communicators of his time.
Name another one.
Name another one? Albert Einstein.
You think this
Hawking.
is a philosopher?
They think philosophically and scientifically.
I'm just going to let those sit for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Stephen Hawking wasn't a philosopher. And I don't...
They have thoughts on the world. Science is our observations of the world. They go hand in hand.
I think about the world. Am I a scientist?
You can employ the scientific method, yeah. If you wanted to go out
You are,
tomorrow
right?
and prove evolution, you
Ah,
could. All the research is there. If you wanted to prove the theory of gravity
awesome.
or the general theory of relativity, the math is there. You need only write it down. That is the beautiful thing about science.
You
Anyone
are
can
one of
access it.
this is ridiculous. I'll put it like this. It's one of those hopeless things where if you don't know, you just not in the know. Um,
If you
those
wanted to
aren't
prove Einstein's theory of
philosophers.
relativity, you could point a telescope at the sky where we can find two galaxies, but it's actually not two galaxies. There's a
I
black hole in the middle, and
I
the
don't know what you're. I
reflecting
don't.
lens separates the light into two
What are you
galaxies for our
responding to?
view.
What are you responding to right now?
This is the scientific method, my friend. Anyone can access it,
What?
anyone can double check the work. You
That's
yourself have the
you.
power to go
You
in and
don't.
double check the theory of
You
gravity.
don't understand the issue with your claims because you basically
I don't
decided
think you
that there
understand
is.
what science is, and you've
I'm just
clearly
interrupting.
demonstrated that
You
multiple
have
times in this
basically
conversation.
closed yourself off to the idea that science is a circular thing that can answer itself, so it needs no warranty. This isn't true. The
Science is
idea,
self-correcting. That's why the research and
okay,
the
you
publishing
repeat this
phase is so
you
important.
continue to say science. You are implying that there is science and pseudoscience. This is an issue. What is that separation? When I ask you what that separation
Proof,
is, you tell me
evidence.
pause. You tell me science. That is circular. I am asking you, what is the separation? What is science and non-science? And it has nothing to do with the method at which you come to a conclusion. The differences in method is only a difference between what is science of the time and not science of the time. This doesn't explain what the difference between pseudoscience and science is, right? And
All
this
right,
is an
let me explain
issue.
you the difference between science and pseudoscience really
Sure.
quickly. So,
Yeah,
the
all the
Christians
differences. Go.
claim that the earth started with Adam and Eve through magic, all right? A wizard just wiggled his fingers and life spawned into existence along with the rest of the
Sure.
universe.
Blasphemous, but sure.
Scientists say, hey, here's our observation on how evolution works. Here's all of our evidence. Here's hundreds of books on it.
Why is there evidence?
Then let's work backwards and find out where that started. Here's the
That's
research
awesome.
paper. Here's how you can double
How is
check me. Here's the experiments I did, and you can double check them and repeat them ad nauseum. In fact, we have.
everything you're talking about is empiricism. It's all pastoria.
Yes,
It,
empiricism. We look at the actual real
warrant
world, not
empiricism.
magic. Not
Wait,
magic. We look at the real world and we make observations and then we test those
it has nothing to
observations.
do. Wait, see this is where you get the anti-religion dogma. No one.
I am anti-theist, yes.
Okay, well this is absurd. But regardless of this fact, you can't warrant those beliefs. But regardless of this fact, um, warrant empiricism.
I'm gonna scream.
Warrant empiricism. Warrant
Warrant
using
your God.
a pastoria. No. Warrant using a pastoria knowledge to make claim on things that have no physical realm. Go ahead. How do you come to this conclusion? Like I want to follow like if there's a linear way of
Are
putting
you
this
are you
together.
asking me to prove something that doesn't exist?
I'm asking you to warrant empiricism, warrant a pastoria knowledge, warrant your epistemology. How possibly warrant the sensory knowledge that we use in
Science
science
deals in
that
things that
isn't even
actually
observable
exist,
in
that we can observe and study and
what is it?
test.
How does one know that?
We can observe, study, and test them. I can feel the weight of a
This is
rock in
so
my
this.
hands. I can tell you the chemical makeup of that rock. And I can tell
So
you how fast it is when I throw it at you.
what about things that are unobservable? So let's put it like this:
Like the
things
air,
that
we can weigh the air. We know the
no,
weight of the air. We
that's
can observe
those are
gravity.
okay. This is ignorant. Air is observable by definition. I am asking you to warrant things that are unobservable. So, for example, let's say that there's a fossil of a dinosaur,
Mm-hmm.
a specific dinosaur. Let's say, let's just make it simple. So, a specific dinosaur fossil. How do you warrant that that dinosaur existed?
We have the fossil. Are you retarded?
Oh, whoa, that's pretty ableist. But well, okay,
I'm
okay,
autistic. I get to swing those.
okay. Well, that's Very progressive of you.
Yes.
Um, yeah, no, shut
We
up.
have the fossil.
So what is stopping something? Let's say hypothetically. How about this? Can we come to agreement that any belief that we can doubt we should dispel for a moment, and then we should try to figure out which beliefs that we can know for certain.
All right, Descartes, how you doing?
Okay. So let's say that there's a fossil of a dinosaur. Is it hypothetically possible that something super, super powerful put that there moments beforehand, and then you dug it up? And that dinosaur maybe not actually existed, but would just existed there for a second?
You mean, was the Earth created last Tuesday?
No,
I've
no,
heard
no.
this theory before. For the audience who don't know, this is
That's
called the
not true.
last Tuesday argument.
That's
Do
not the
we
last.
know any
This is
provable means that everything in the observable universe and the exact way it currently exists was all created last Tuesday, including all of the history we can observe?
that's not the argument. That's not the argument.
Your argument was if a fossil was put in the ground by God, could we then prove that that animal existed and wasn't just
This
put there
isn't
by God?
that isn't
That's the
yeah
last
that
Tuesday
that is
argument.
this isn't the last Tuesday argument. The last Tuesday argument, it's not even an argument. The last Tuesdayism is just the idea that it's possible that all of our memories and everything came into existence literally like last Tuesday.
Yeah.
That is not my claim. When
And
we
you know
talk about
what? To
when
that,
we talk
I would say face down the war cry of science. Prove that it started last Tuesday. Prove that a God put it there.
that is why your empiricism is false. But like, and we can use this
No, that
argument
is
to do it
why
with
we
like
know it to be true.
no.
You refer to things that cannot be proven, and you're
You're
like, well,
saying
science can't prove the things that don't
no. You're
exist. To
You're
which I
saying
say, yes,
you're
science can
saying a bunch
prove
of
things
you're
that
saying a
don't.
bunch of hubbub. You're literally not listening. We'll put it like this. You are saying I am saying things that I can prove. No, you necessarily can't. The ideal you have to warrant empiricism. We can agree that empiricism can to some extent be falsified because we can take individual examples of things that are quotations observable and then hypothetically say that they didn't exist until a certain and that they were put there with intent to believe so.
No,
That
you've
is
made an
the
assumption.
proving form.
You have to assume that something put them there. But you have to prove that
No,
to the
we
scientific
don't have to. You
method.
don't wait. No, pause. The assumption is that your claim is falsifiable to an extent. If I said this rock has existed here infinitely, right? This
You'd have
rock
to
has
prove
probably
that.
been. No. Pause.
Yes.
Stop inter. No, pause. No one said no. Just pause because you're not letting me finish. Instead of talking, listen. You'd probably understand a little bit more if you didn't have these conclusions already derived before I said anything.
Mm-hmm.
If someone was to say or test in some observable or an empiric method that a rock had been there forever, right? And someone was to say, isn't it possible that the rock and all of its components were put together in this exact way, let's say a month ago, and placed here, and that no matter how much you tested it, because of the organization of it and its makeup of its matter, that there's no way to tell whether or not it's infinitely old or just a month old, right? This, to some extent, is an issue with empiricism.
That's
So
the last Tuesday argument to a
that's
T.
that's not the last.
You even said you had to stumble for a second because you're like, oh wait, I can't say last Tuesday. I'll say last month.
Well,
The
no,
the
it's not.
time
It's
is
not.
arbitrary.
This isn't. You have to understand. The last Tuesday. It's not. There's no such thing as the last Tuesday argument. The last Tuesdayism is just, hey, like, wouldn't it be kind of wacky and crazy if this was like Groundhog Day? Like, no, like, we're not doing that. I'm just simply saying the issue with empiricism is that in order to test things, they have to be observable. All things that are observable
Yes.
and all things that are empirical in a sense
That
can
is
be
the strength
falsified.
of the scientific method.
It's
It
literally its
encompasses
probably
everything that's observable.
its biggest weakness
Prove it.
because empiricism and observable science is falsifiable because there is a capability of
Anything that
what you
can
are.
be observed can be assessed using the scientific method. If it
Okay,
cannot be
this is
observed, you cannot prove that the
wait,
thing it cannot
just
observe
think about how circular
exists.
what you're saying is really quickly. I am telling you that, and you can agree with this. Like, this is true. Like, there's no like, it is possible that this is falsifiable, right? It is possible that this is not true.
Okay,
Therefore,
let me
it is
turn the tables
falsifiable.
then on you for the last 20 minutes we've got here.
Sure.
You're a theist. You believe that a God exists. But your God cannot be proven using the scientific method. Your God is outside of observation.
Yeah.
How is it then that you got the right God? How do you know it's not Thor or Zeus or some other god beyond your observation? You have nothing in the
No,
observable
hold
universe.
on.
Sub
Theism doesn't necessarily claim a specific god. You can be a theist without necessarily believing in a specific dogma or religion.
What are you, Taoist?
No, there's nothing to do with it. I'm saying that you can. Theism just believes that there is a God that exists and it is a moral one. It is not.
And
Theism
that
doesn't
it's a
mean
moral
that
one? That's an extra assumption. You got to prove that.
Yes, that is what theism means. If I didn't believe in theism, I would just say deism.
Yeah, see, but the difference between you and me is that when I say something exists via the scientific method, I can point to a mountain of evidence for it, and when you do it,
All your
you're like,
evidence is
well, I just believe it.
falsifiable, and all your evidence is falsifiable and worthless.
Uh-huh.
There's a foundational assumption that you have to make. That
See,
your
this is the
evidence
thing I got the problem with you, my dude. Instead of trying to defend your God, you instead do this little song and dance about how actually all empiricism and any method we have of observing the universe is not useful and
you
incorrect
haven't been
because
able
you
you
know
have
I
not
could
the
eviscerate you
other than
if
you
I
just
turn the
repeating
cannon.
pause. Other than you just repeating the scientific method, you have not been capable of warranting empiricism.
I think that is the single, a very strong argument.
You can acknowledge that it's possibly false, and therefore that it is falsifiable. All of empiricism is falsifiable to some extent because it is observation.
Everything that I have said can be proven.
No, it cannot.
It can be proven. It has been proven.
It can be proven so long as you assume that it isn't falsifiable.
This is so stupid.
No, it's not. Like, for example, I can prove to you that I'm holding a rock, right?
Yeah.
Well, how can you prove that you're holding a rock? Well, so long as observable science is true.
As long as it's observable, yes.
No, as long as it's true. Pause. I'm currently holding my wallet. I'm holding here. Right. I don't know if you can hear this. Maybe you can hear that. I'm smacking my wallet again.
Okay.
I am holding a wallet. How do you know this to be true? Well, because I can observe it. Well, how do you know that observations are true? Well, because I'm holding my wallet. Well, I mean, how do you know that? Well, because I'm observing it. And it's like, you've come to this circular conclusion, and when I ask you to warrant, okay, well, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Actually warrant that the wallet is in your hand. Well, it's in my hand because I have to basically assume that all of observational science is unfalsifiable. Like, I basically have to say, well, observational science is possibly false, but because I'm observing it, I have to come to the conclusion that it's true. This is absurd. Like, this is the issue with empiricism. Like, all empiricism is based off of observational science. And this is the issue between the separation of pseudo-science and science, which I don't believe actually exists. But the main point, though, is that your argument, besides saying that there's a scientific method, which is completely dependent on the observational method. So, for example, I'll add an extra step. I'll just basically show you the flaw. I am holding a wallet. Prove it. Well, because I'm observing it. Well, how do you know that your observation is true? Well, I can run the scientific method. Well, what is the scientific method using? Well, it uses empiricism. Well, what is empiricism? Well, it's observable, perceptual science. So, because I'm holding my wallet, and I can look at my wallet 3 times in a row, and then I can show my wallet to someone else 3 times in a row, and now it's peer-reviewed magically, right? Now,
wow,
this proves
we've
wallet
looped all the way back to the tree in the forest. A scientist and a philosopher walk into a forest, and they see a tree fall down. The philosopher turns and says, how do we know that that tree made a sound? Can we really trust our ability to observe? What if a tree falls and we cannot see it? If we have not observed a tree falling in the forest, can we know that it made a sound? And the scientist turns and goes, yes, you moron. Science, we can prove that sound exists because it's vibrations in the air. If something moves...
Then the gap in your logic is astounding. It's like you're missing a puzzle. The issue is that you seriously believe that all questions can be answered by science.
Yes.
Because you believe
all observations about the universe can be filtered through the scientific method. Yes.
Yes, they are completely reliant on observation. Yes. If you are someone who believes in the
Observation,
falsified,
question, research,
no,
hypothesis,
no, pause,
test,
pause. No, nothing
analyze,
after that.
report.
Awesome. And yes, the foundation of all science is observation. I
Yes.
do not believe that empiricism is always valid. And you know for a fact that empiricism, or the foundation for it, is falsifiable to an extent.
So how do you know
If
your God
anyone,
exists?
say again?
How do you know your God exists? If it cannot be observed, how do you know he exists? Or she, or they, or them?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I don't use it observational.
What do you use?
A priori.
Explain that. Elucidate.
I don't use observable facts. I don't think observation appears valuable. I believe that you can denote some form of deity use of a priori.
How?
How so?
Yeah, how so? How do you know it's
Okay.
not Thor? How do you know it's not Darth Vader?
Well, I'm not saying any specific one. Theism doesn't necessarily.
Do you believe in a specific God? I assume you
I
do.
do. Yeah,
Which one?
I'm a Christian.
Okay. There are 1,400 different sects of Christianity, and there are thousands of religions across the planet. How do you know
Yeah.
yours is right?
Oh, because the other ones are wrong.
How?
Because they suck.
How?
Well, how do they suck? Well, I think their interpretation of the Bible is wrong. It's not that Christians believe.
Not all of them believe in the Bible. What
No,
about the
that's not-
Chinese, or the Japanese, or the Polynesians, or the Celtics?
Those are ethnicities. Those aren't religious groups.
Celtic religions, Chinese religions like Buddhism,
I thought you were
Taoism,
still talking
Taoism.
about okay, say I was like,
How do you know your God is not Quetzalcoatl?
well, I don't believe that interpretation.
How do you know?
How do I know?
Yeah, how do you
Well,
know?
I believe that well, let's put it like this. I think that there's a separation between gods that are the results of filling in. Like, so for example, Thor is an explanation. I don't believe that Christ is an explanation for anything. It could be really easily said that the Old Testament it might be an explanation for existence itself, but there wouldn't be a necessity for Christ, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So it's not necessarily a gap argument. Like there's no gap that is needing to be filled by the Jewish people, right? Especially not the Jewish people. I mean, there's no culture that necessarily wanted Christ to exist. So it's not as if there was a cultural reason for making up Christ. It wasn't filling type of scientific gap.
I don't know. The Romans found reasons for needing Christianity to exist. It gave them the divine right of kings.
Say again?
The divine right of kings that started with the Romans. They found it politically useful to...
The popes?
No. What was his name? Diocletian? Some Roman emperor made Christianity their state religion because it gave them the divine right of kings.
That has nothing to do with my claim. What does that have to do with anything? Yeah, people use Christianity as a justification to do many things. I am saying that the reason why there's a separation between Islam, Judaism, Christianity, as opposed to religions where you have multiple deities, so the Hellenistic deities, the more Roman deities, or the Nordic ones, or any other. I'd go so far to say is the Hindu ones, but I might be incorrect to say this. Is that there is no necessity in culture for Islam or Christianity or the Jewish to create figures such as Christ or Muhammad. There is no necessity. There's no gap that's filled. There's no natural phenomena that needs an answer. Especially when you come to things like Islam. This is why I think Islam is I think that the Muslim scholars are actually some of the most talented ones, because the thing that makes their religion so sturdy is the fact that it is an unchanging text. So there's no contradiction in text in the sense that there's been any changes or anything like that. It has been a consistent piece of history for a long time.
There are multiple different sects of Islam.
It has nothing to do with being different writing. It has nothing to do with different writings. So obviously, like the Protestant and Catholic divide, to some extent was a separation, well, first and foremost, it was a translation from Latin to a kind of more English. And then the separation was obviously that the Protestants changed some of the verses. So,
okay, so you You
Yeah, but
simply
really quickly, so
say,
wait, just really quickly, so I can just because you kind of asked a question midway. Just to finish my thought, I think the reason why Islam is one of the sturdiest religions, I think Islam is quite a sturdy religion. It has an unchanged word of God, what they define through the biblical text, or not biblical, sorry, their religious texts or sacred texts are pretty much and translated to a T. And on top of that, there doesn't seem to be any necessity to create Islam, which is actually a beneficial thing. Like there is no cultural need for Muhammad to exist. So the idea that Muhammad is a figure that fills in a gap of some sort is falsifiable. Like this just wouldn't be true in any. No reason for Muhammad to exist. There's no reason to create Muhammad figure, right? So Muhammad is real in a sense. That is what separates Islam, Christianity, and Judaism from the Thor, as you put it, because Thor is to fill in a gap. There's no gap that's filled by Muhammad. Like
fill
what
in what
mythos,
gap?
mythos, like what myth is Muhammad wishing to fill? Like what phenomena is Muhammad filling?
The idea of Christ saving us from our
I
sins,
said
and then
Muhammad. I said Muhammad.
I'm less
What
familiar
gap?
with Islam than I am with Christianity. I
That's
grew up in
fine. What? No, it's
Christianity.
fine. It's fantastic. So what gap is Muhammad filling? In an era where Christianity is an abundant thing, with over 400 years of Christianity existing, pretty much, and kind of the starting figureheads.
Oh yeah, that's such a great point. Hey, do you know that your religion isn't the oldest one, right? Like Christianity's no spring chicken, but there are religions older than yours. What makes you
Yeah,
think yours is
sure.
right?
Because ours is why is ours right? Because I just explained ours isn't a gap. Like there's no gap necessity. Like I'll put it like this: there's outstanding evidence for Christianity in a historical sense, but I don't think that I'm going to. I don't care to harp on that. I don't think it's very valuable to argue the validity of Christ. Like Christ did exist as a person. Like this is true. That this is not like this is not like a stupid statement. Like historians can generally agree that Christ existed, and the Bible is a self-sufficient method of proving this. But like I said,
The Bible
the
is
reason
full of contradictions, riddled with them.
no, I think that most contradictions in the
Hell,
Bible. I
the
think
concept of the Christian God is contradictory.
no, it is not.
Have you ever heard of Epicurus?
Oh God. Okay, go ahead. Go. Okay, get it. I'm excited for this one. We'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
All right.
I know what you're gonna
This
say.
will be the closing arguments before we'll have to head out in 8 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. If he is both willing and able, then whence cometh evil? If he is neither able nor willing, then why call him God? I can copy paste that into the chat.
You seriously think the problem of evil hasn't been right? Not resolved, but you seriously think that Epicurus to some extent is this like solid thing? Like,
My brother in Christ, I grew up in the church, and I started a radio show called Creation versus Corruption because I was so dedicated to fighting for the Christian cause.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just asking you, do you seriously think that there isn't an issue with what Epicurus is saying?
I
Like,
think
are you actually under the impression that after 2,000 years, there hasn't been a single response to Epicurus?
I took this to multiple pastors, and none of them were able to actually give me an answer. I'd be excited to see if you
That's not what I
could.
asked you at all. I'm asking you, have you seriously come to the conclusion that no one has like I just kind of want to sit back and let this one kind of sit. You really have come to like you're bringing up the problem of evil, but not just the problem of evil. You're bringing up Epicurus.
Yes. Just as an example that there is inherent contradiction in the concept of the Christian God.
Why is there a contradiction?
Is he omnipotent? Is he willing? Is he all-loving? Where does evil come from? Why do little children get cancer?
Okay.
You can, or why do children die in earthquakes?
Yes, fine. No, it's fine. So this is all under the assumption that there is unnecessary suffering, correct?
Yes. Are you about to say that children getting cancer is a necessary suffering?
How do you know that it isn't? No, honestly.
God, you gotta love Christians, man.
No, wait. Yeah, I know. It's a perfectly valid response. no response back. I'm asking you. You define something as unnecessary. How do you know what is necessary? To what extent can you prove that some suffering
I'm an
and some
empiricist,
is not?
remember? I think it's all unnecessary. There's
Well,
no necessary about
then
it.
you wouldn't even bring up Epicurus because you would automatically a question. Okay, let's put it like this: you wouldn't even be using this argument because you would make the assumption that something omnipotent to begin with wouldn't be factually true. So don't use arguments that you fundamentally disagree with when you. This is like it's like a double-edged
I'm
sword, man.
using your framework against you to
You're
point out a hypocrisy.
you're not using a framework against me. You are using wait, yo,
The
friend.
framework that a
You are
God
using
exists.
no. You like how okay, this is so ignorant. You are using an argument that you fundamentally disagree with to attack others when you fundamentally know what's wrong with the argument. Like
Yeah, I'm pointing out a
if you
hypocrisy. Of course, I'm using an
wait,
argument I disagree.
no,
The argument I agree with. The framing I disagree with. The
let's
argument
put it
goes that
let's
if
put it
God
like no.
exists, why does evil
You
exist?
cannot prove that all suffering is unnecessary. Like
You
this
can't
is
prove it is. You've already denied that
I
you'll prove anything. You can't even
you
prove your God
the,
exists.
That's not the claim. Well, I'm just going to respond to besides you saying a bunch of hubbub. Like honestly, the rubbish that comes out of you about nothing. But we'll put it like this: you are claiming there's unnecessary suffering. How does one know that the suffering is unnecessary? This like you this is a
Yeah,
that
I
doesn't
can tell you how we know that suffering is unnecessary. That's the framing of the argument.
how could you possibly in any circumstance ever come to the conclusion that some form of suffering is necessary and others are unnecessary? What distinction can you possibly make?
Yeah.
There's no distinction on a moral level that you can make. There's no empiricism possible or observability to it. There's no giant thing in the sky that floats over people suffering with a check mark or an X, right? Like there is no way to prove that some forms of suffering are unnecessary. So the assumption would have to be that yes, all unnecessary suffering is immoral and wrong. So no God would allow for unnecessary suffering. So the conclusion must be is that all suffering is in service of something. Now what that is well, I may be possibly alluding that this might be hard to actually describe. But the fact that it's a possibility is it is a reason to falsify or it's falsifiable what Epicurus is saying. Like the idea of unnecessary suffering is falsifiable. Like it just means that there is suffering that is necessary. Now, why is it necessary? Is I
Can you prove that the suffering of children who die in earthquakes or from cancer is necessary?
no, you cannot prove that it is necessary, but we must come to the conclusion that it must be.
Why?
Because okay, well, like this is like you follow the same line of logic. Like this is so simple. If there is a God that is all powerful that can stop things like unnecessary suffering, why
Mm-hmm.
doesn't he? And then you have the whole list. Why he doesn't?
Yeah, why doesn't he stop unnecessary suffering?
So
And
the
instead,
assumption.
no, this is the problem with your thinking. Instead of realizing that, oh, that's a problem with my God, you go, oh no, the suffering of children must be necessary. You've backed yourself
Wait a
into a
minute.
reprehensible position because you
Wait, no,
cannot accept that you're God.
this is no reprehensible position. This is like the most common response. Well, besides other ones like free will and not knowing are very.
I got the free will argument right here. It's up on screen.
I don't really. I'm not seeing it, and I don't particularly care. But yeah. The point being though is that no, this is a very common response. This is a no-seum argument. The idea that suffering is unnecessary because there's no obvious for it. It's a very I just say it's a very ignorant claim.
All right.
It doesn't make
Drop
any
it
sense.
in chat.
The idea that you'd be able to see the purpose of suffering is somewhat absurd. No, I don't know what you're posting. None of this is valuable, but yeah, no. The
It's
fact of the matter
arguments that rip your religion to shreds.
it really doesn't because you
This
are
is
the
baby's
assumption.
first like argumentation. I wrote this stuff when I was 17. It's that
That's
easy.
that's awesome. The assumption you're making is wrong. The foundation of your argument is incorrect. It denotes suffering as it denotes suffering as unnecessary. How does one know? How would one know that all suffering is unnecessary? What would be required to see that suffering is unnecessary compared to necessary suffering? Because there is no clear way to make this distinction, and you can't say that unnecessary suffering exists, while there is suffering that is necessary, then it makes no sense to say that there's no reason for suffering. Like, you
Cool.
cannot come to this
So,
conclusion.
children dying from cancer is necessary suffering under your worldview.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Yep.
And with that, we are just about out of
Yep.
time. So, thank you for stopping by and thank you for the
You mind if I
conversation.
drop some stuff real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so anyone who actually wants to understand why his claims are wrong or her claims are wrong, I would just look up the no-seum argument. There's a lot of no-seum claims. I believe there's a really good article from, there's a couple in the 50s that I read. And I definitely suggest reading Feyerabend if you want to look at the science, pseudo-science distinction, the separation too, that actually denote why this kind of scientific method. I don't know what the heck are those little images with the guys who's like the little drawing. What are those called? You know what I'm talking about?
I do not. Sorry.
Stone face. Sorry, is it stone face? Stone face comic.
Oh, you mean stone toss?
Stone toss. Yes. Stone toss. Right. It's stone toss.
All right.
Yeah. So if you want to know why his claim is or her claim is a stone toss kind of a comic page, I definitely have the prior band. Read some books between the distinction between logical positivism and well, obviously people who disagree with this assumption, Popper and Kuhn are
Okay.
logical positivists. But
be well, my
there's plenty
friend.
of research out there. No, it's fine. There's plenty of research out there. Go ahead and read it. This is a very unnecessary debate. I'd say you should probably read a little bit more.
I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Goodbye.
When is this going to be uploaded, by the way?
Probably next Monday. I'm going to try and drop the debates on Mondays and then the smaller videos in between.
Next Monday? Whole week?
Well, I mean, because our last debate is out right now.
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Adios.
All right, bye.
Okay. Wow. The suffering of children is necessary. See, this is the problem with Christians. All I have to do is let them explain their own beliefs with minimal questioning, and they'll say the most absurd or abhorrent shit. Yeah. Once again, the scientific method: observation, research, hypothesis, test, analyze, report. It is the single best way we can use to identify the entire observable universe. However, because this guy couldn't prove that his God exists, if I really dug into him on that argument, he instead goes about how the scientific method itself, our entire concept, is useless. He did a similar thing in the last debate, where instead of us digging in on whether or not Donald Trump was a fascist, he instead goes about how all voting in America is illegitimate because it doesn't have a national audit, even though all of our voting systems are done by by individual states, and those individual states did have audits. This is going to be something I'm going to have to keep an eye on in further debates with this guy. There's a Mott and Bailey. There's a position that he can't defend, and so he jumps to any idea that we might use to categorize or break down the actual position is actually useless and false, and we shouldn't consider it. The scientific method, which would eviscerate his God, is in fact just fantasy. There's no difference between science and pseudoscience. There's nothing, and we can't use the tools of observation to tell an unobservable thing. God, that. Anyways, I had fun. Follow me in the Discord if you want to join in any debates or you just want to hang out with me. Those will be linked in the description. I have a Patreon if you want to donate to me. That'd be awesome. I have a TikTok where most people see me, but the debates are too long for me to actually put all the debates on TikTok. So they'll all be hosted here on YouTube. So, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all in the next debate, which, I don't know, I think will be on abortion, so that ought to be fun. And I will see you all next time. Goodbye.